Rain hammered against the stone walls of the Alpha Mansion. Inside the grand banquet hall, laughter echoed beneath golden chandeliers. But none of it hurt as much as his laughter. Luna Evelyn stood frozen beside the doorway, one trembling hand pressed secretly against her stomach. Pregnant. With his child. And across the crowded hall, Alpha stood smiling while another woman sat beside him wearing the silver Luna crown meant for her. The entire pack watched. Some whispered, some smirked. And then Alpha Lucien raised his glass. To the future Luna of Blackthorne Pack. The room erupted into applause. Evelyn's breathing shattered. Not one person noticed the tears burning down her face. Not even him. Then the woman beside Lucien leaned close and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Some wolves are born to rule. Others are only useful for warming empty beds. Laughter exploded across the hall. And Lucien laughed too. That was the moment something inside Evelyn died. But no one noticed when she quietly removed the moonstone mating ring from her finger. No one noticed when blood trickled down her palm from clenching it too tightly. And no one knew that before dawn broke, the Luna they humiliated would vanish forever, taking the Alpha heir with her. Narrator. Years later, survivors of Blackthorne Pack would speak about that night in hushed voices. Not because of the storm. Not because of the betrayal. But because no one who witnessed Luna Evelyn leave ever forgot the expression on her face. It was not rage. It was not heartbreak. It was something far more unsettling. Acceptance. The kind that comes only after a soul has been pushed beyond pain. The kind that appears moments before someone disappears forever. And according to the oldest wolves in the Northern Territories, those who vanish with that expression rarely return unchanged. The Blackthorne estate stood at the edge of the Frostfang Mountains, surrounded by forests so dense that moonlight barely touched the ground beneath them. Ancient wolves once ruled those woods. Hunters avoided them. Travelers vanished inside them. Even rogue packs refused to cross certain parts after dark. Yet on the night Luna Evelyn disappeared, the forest was the only place she could run. Because inside the mansion that was supposed to protect her, she had already become a ghost. The banquet continued long after Evelyn left the hall. Music played. Glasses clinked together. Servants moved nervously between drunken pack elites who celebrated as if a coronation had already taken place. And at the center of it all sat Alpha Lucien Blackthorne. Cold. Untouchable. Respected. A ruler feared across 5 territories. But those closest to him would later admit something felt wrong that night. Not obvious. Not enough to stop the celebration. Just small details. The Alpha barely touched his drink. His gaze kept drifting toward the entrance where Evelyn had stood. And each time the doors opened, his wolf reacted. Restless. Agitated. As though some buried instinct was clawing at the inside of his chest. First Lucien ignored it. Alpha wolves were trained to suppress weakness. Emotion clouded judgment. Attachment created vulnerability. That lesson had been carved into him since childhood. And Lucien Blackthorne had spent years mastering control. But there was one thing no Alpha could fully silence. The mating bond. The moon goddess did not create mate bonds for politics. She did not care about alliances, power, bloodlines, or the expectations of pack elders. The bond was primitive, violent, absolute. It connected souls whether they wanted it or not. And the more one mate suffered, the harder it became for the other to breathe. That was the curse of it. A mate could lie to everyone else, but never to their wolf. And while Lucien smiled beside Seraphina beneath the chandeliers, his wolf already knew something terrible had begun. Witnesses later recalled the exact moment the atmosphere inside the banquet hall changed. It happened shortly after midnight. Without warning, every candle in the eastern corridor extinguished simultaneously, one by one, as though an invisible force had passed through the mansion. Several wolves felt it instantly. Chill. Not from the storm outside. From the bond magic woven into Blackthorne territory itself. Old packs believed powerful emotions could affect sacred territory. Grief, rage, love. The mansion had stood for over 200 years, had seen wars, executions, challenges for the Alpha throne. Yet servants who worked there all their lives claimed the halls had never felt as cold as they did that night. Even the wolves stationed near the entrance began shifting uneasily. Animals hidden deep within the forest started howling. Not aggressively, warningly. And somewhere high above the mountains, a single white wolf appeared briefly on the cliffs overlooking the estate. Watching, silent, then gone again. Inside the banquet hall, Serafina leaned closer to Lucien. You should announce the rejection soon. Lucien's expression hardened instantly. Several nearby elders lowered their eyes. No one spoke when the subject of rejection surfaced. Because rejection was not merely emotional. Among werewolves it was brutal. To reject a fated mate meant severing part of the soul itself. Some wolves survived it. Others lost their minds afterward. A few never shifted again. And females carrying unborn heirs rarely survived the pain. That was why Lucien hesitated every time the council pressured him. Not because rejecting Evelyn would damage his reputation. Because some hidden part of him feared what losing her would do to him, though he would never admit that aloud. Serafina noticed his silence immediately. Her fingers tightened around her wine glass. She embarrasses you, she whispered carefully. Lucien said nothing. She weakens your image before the other alphas. Still silence. Then finally, she is my mate. The words came rough, heavy, like something dragged unwillingly from deep inside him. Serafina's eyes darkened for only a second before the smile returned. But not your equal. That sentence lingered between them. Because in truth, many inside Blackthorne Pack believed it. Evelyn lacked the ruthlessness expected from Luna wolves. She avoided political games, spent time among servants, visited injured patrol wolves herself, remembered names no alpha ever bothered learning. The elders called it softness, but younger wolves remembered something different. Whenever Evelyn walked through the territory, fear disappeared. Pups ran toward her. Omega wolves smiled around her. Even injured rogues brought to the estate calmed in her presence. There was a warmth around her the mansion had not known in years. And perhaps that was the real reason certain people wanted her gone. Warmth changes people. And power built on fear cannot survive where comfort exists. No one noticed when Lucien suddenly stood from the table. The music continued. The dancers kept moving. But the alpha's instincts had begun roaring loud enough to drown out everything else. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. His wolf paced violently beneath his skin. Go to her. Lucien scanned the hall. No Evelyn. He looked toward the upper balconies. Me. Toward the eastern wing. Darkness. A strange pressure settled in his chest. Not pain. Absence. As if the bond itself had begun stretching too far. Without warning, Lucien staggered slightly. A sharp pulse slammed through the mating bond so violently that nearby wolves froze. The alpha's eyes flashed gold. For one terrifying second, he felt Evelyn's emotions. Not sadness, not anger, finality. And suddenly, Lucien could not hear the music anymore. Only rain. Only thunder. Only the distant sound of a door somewhere inside the mansion slowly creaking open. Far above the banquet hall, inside the silent eastern chambers, Evelyn stood alone before a mirror. The Luna crown rested on the table beside her. Untouched. Rainwater slid down the windows behind her while candlelight flickered weakly across the room. She looked exhausted. Not physically. Soul-deep exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that arrives after months of swallowing humiliation in silence. Slowly, she opened her trembling hand. Inside her palm sat the moonstone ring Lucien had placed on her finger during the mating ceremony 3 years earlier. A symbol of eternity, devotion, belonging. Now stained with blood. Evelyn stared at it for a long time. then closed her fingers around it so tightly the stone cracked slightly under pressure. And somewhere far below the mansion, wolves began howling again. Narrator. After that night outside the study, something changed inside the Blackthorne estate. Not immediately, not loudly. At first, the shift revealed itself through small things no one paid attention to. Servants noticed untouched meals returned from Evelyn's chambers. The gardeners stopped hearing her sing softly among the silver roses near the eastern courtyard. The Omega children who once followed her through the halls asking for bedtime stories suddenly began asking the same question over and over again. Why does Luna Evelyn look sad all the time? No one answered them. Because in Blackthorne Pack, sadness was treated like weakness. And weakness was something predators smelled from miles away. Those who lived inside the estate later described the mansion as divided into two worlds. The western wing belonged to Lucien. Power, politics, council meetings that lasted until dawn, training grounds stained with blood, alphas barking orders beneath torchlight, everything cold, controlled, demanding. Then there was the eastern wing. Evelyn's side, quieter, warmer, filled with candlelight and old books. The scent of lavender drifted through the halls there. Injured wolves recovering from patrols often rested easier near those chambers. Even frightened servants preferred assignments near Evelyn's rooms because she spoke to them like they mattered. And perhaps that was why the elders distrusted her kindness. Kindness creates loyalty differently than fear. Fear controls wolves. Kindness makes them choose. Weeks passed after the shattered tray incident. Lucien and Evelyn spoke less and less. At meals, silence sat between them heavier than chains. At council gatherings, Evelyn remained beside the alpha throne while Seraphina occupied everyone's attention. Sometimes Lucien looked toward Evelyn as though wanting to speak, but he never did. And silence, left alone long enough, becomes its own kind of wound. Then came the first strange incident. Late one evening, a patrol wolf disappeared near the northern border. Nothing unusual about that at first. Rogues attacked often during winter. But when the search party found him 3 days later, he was alive, barely, frozen near the riverbanks deep within Frostfang Forest. The wolf refused to explain what happened. He only repeated one sentence over and over again. She was standing in the snow. No one understood what he meant. The patrol wolf's body showed no signs of attack. No claw wounds. No bites. Only terror. Pure terror. Witnesses claimed his hands shook violently whenever moonlight touched the windows. Then, during questioning, the wolf whispered something even stranger. She asked me why the Luna cries. After that, he refused to speak again. The story spread quickly through Blackthorne territory. Most dismissed it as winter madness. But older wolves exchanged uneasy looks. Because Frostfang Forest carried stories older than the Blackthorne bloodline itself. Stories about wolves who wandered too far into grief. Wolves whose pain became powerful enough to call things from the woods that should never answer. And though no one dared speak those legends aloud near Lucien, many began noticing the timing. The strange events started shortly after Evelyn stopped smiling. Meanwhile, Seraphina's influence over the estate deepened. She attended council meetings beside Lucien, trained with high-ranking warriors, walked the territory as though she already ruled it. And each day, Evelyn seemed to disappear further into the background. But there was one thing Seraphina never understood. Lucien might ignore Evelyn publicly, yet his instincts remained chained to her. He noticed every absence, every missed meal, every sleepless night she spent pacing the eastern balcony beneath the rain. Once, during a council discussion about border disputes, Lucien abruptly lost focus mid-sentence. The elders fell silent immediately. An alpha losing concentration during negotiations was almost unheard of. Then Lucien stood suddenly, without explanation, without permission, and left the chamber. The council watched in stunned silence as he crossed the estate alone, straight toward Evelyn's rooms. as though some invisible force had pulled him there. He found her sitting near the fireplace wrapped in a grey shawl. The flames cast soft gold across her face. For a moment, Lucien simply stood there watching her. And perhaps what unsettled him most was how distant she looked now. Not angry, not emotional, just unreachable, like someone slowly fading away while still breathing. "You missed dinner," he said finally. Evelyn kept her eyes on the fire. "I wasn't hungry." Lucien stepped closer. "You've barely eaten this week." Still she did not look at him. A long silence followed. Then quietly, "You meant what you said that night." Lucien's expression hardened slightly. "You keep returning to this. Because it never stopped hurting." That answer landed harder than he expected. Lucien looked away briefly. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. "I was frustrated," he muttered. Evelyn finally looked at him then. And what Lucien saw in her eyes disturbed him deeply. Not hope, not love, the absence of both. "You didn't deny it," she whispered. Lucien opened his mouth, closed it again, because the truth sat between them like poison. Part of him had wondered whether fate made a mistake, not because Evelyn lacked value, but because loving her felt dangerous. The bond made him weaker in ways he could not control. And Lucien Blackthorne feared losing control more than death itself. Evelyn stood slowly from the chair. "You know what hurts the most?" she asked softly. Lucien remained silent. "It's not Serafina." A flicker crossed his face. "It's knowing strangers defended me more than my own mate ever did." The room fell deathly still. Lucien felt something twist violently inside his chest. Because despite everything, he knew she was right. There were Knights Council elders insulted her openly while he remained silent. Moments servants mocked her quietly within earshot while he ignored it. And each time he convinced himself he was protecting order, maintaining balance, avoiding conflict. But deep down, Lucien understood the truth. Cowardice often disguises itself as control. Evelyn walked past him toward the balcony doors. The cold wind pushed into the room immediately. Far below, the forest stretched endlessly beneath moonlight, dark, waiting. "You ever notice," Evelyn said quietly, "how the forest sounds different at night?" Lucien frowned slightly. "What?" She stared toward the distant trees. "It listens." The answer unsettled him more than it should have. Then Evelyn added something almost too soft to hear. "Sometimes I think it hears me crying." A sharp chill crawled down Lucien's spine, because wolves trusted instinct above logic. And in that moment, his instinct screamed. Something was wrong. Not around the territory. Not in the council. Not even with Serafina. With Evelyn. Something inside her was changing. Slowly. Silently. And whatever waited in the Frostfang forest seemed to be changing with her. 3 nights later, the mansion servants woke to screams echoing through the lower halls. Guards rushed toward the sound with weapons drawn. They found one of the elder wolves collapsed near the western staircase, alive, but trembling uncontrollably. His eyes remained fixed toward the shadows at the end of the corridor. "What happened?" the guards demanded. The elder pointed shakily toward the darkness. There was someone standing there. "Who?" The old wolf swallowed hard, then whispered, "The Luna." The guards exchanged confused looks. "Evelyn." But the elder's face turned pale instantly. "No." He shook violently. "Not Evelyn." Then the torches lining the hallway extinguished all at once. And somewhere far above the mansion, a wolf howl shattered the silence of the mountains. Narrator. The collapse beneath the silver willow trees would later become one of the most discussed moments in Blackthorne history. Not because Luna Evelyn fainted. Pregnancies among werewolves were rare, but not unheard of. What unsettled people afterward was everything surrounding it. Timing, the location, and the strange behavior of the forest immediately before she fell. according to the gardeners working nearby that afternoon. The entire eastern garden had gone silent moments earlier. Birds stopped singing. The wind disappeared completely. Even the willow branches stopped moving. One servant later claimed the temperature dropped so suddenly that frost formed across the stone path beneath Evelyn's feet. Another swore she heard whispering near the trees. Not words, something softer. Like distant voices speaking beneath water. First, no one connected these details together. Not until much later. Not until Blackthorne Pack began looking back at every moment they failed to understand. Evelyn had been walking alone when the pain struck. One hand pressed against the low curve of her stomach instinctively before she even knew why. Then came the dizziness. Dark. Violent. The world tilted beneath her feet. And for one terrifying second, she heard something. Howl. Not outside. Inside her mind. Ancient. Heavy. Will. The sound carried enough force to freeze her blood. Then darkness swallowed her completely. When the pack healer arrived, several servants had already gathered around Evelyn beneath the willow trees. Witnesses described her as unusually pale. Come. Come. The healer immediately ordered everyone away. No interruptions. No questions. No guards. Even then, older servants exchanged nervous glances. Because Blackthorne healers rarely showed fear. And the healer looked afraid. Hours later, rain tapped gently against the windows of the eastern chambers while Evelyn sat wrapped in blankets near the fire. The healer remained unusually quiet while preparing herbs across the table. Several times she glanced toward Evelyn's stomach, then toward the door, as though expecting someone to burst inside. Finally, she spoke. You're carrying an alpha heir. Silence filled the room instantly. Evelyn stared at her, unmoving. The words didn't seem real at first. Heir. Lucien's child. A child created through the moon goddess bond itself. For a brief moment, everything else disappeared. The humiliation, the loneliness, the distance between her and Lucien. Hope rushed into the empty spaces inside her chest so suddenly it hurt. Because somewhere deep inside, Evelyn still loved him. And love makes people believe impossible things. Maybe the child would change him. Maybe Lucien would finally see her. Maybe this family could still survive. For the first time in months, Evelyn smiled. Fragile. But real. The healer, however, did not smile back. That detail would later disturb many people who heard the story. Because while Evelyn looked hopeful, the healer looked deeply unsettled. As though the pregnancy itself carried consequences no one yet understood. Then the older woman asked a strange question. Has the alpha been behaving differently around you? Evelyn frowned slightly. What do you mean? The healer hesitated. Careful now. Too careful. Restless. Distracted. Aggressive. Evelyn looked down quietly. He barely notices me at all. The healer's expression darkened. And though she said nothing else aloud, later records taken from Blackthorne medical archives revealed something important. Alpha heirs born from fully bonded mates were considered exceptionally rare. But ancient texts also warned of something else. The stronger the bloodline, the stronger the emotional connection during pregnancy, meaning the unborn child could influence both parents before birth. Instincts intensified, dreams became unstable, wolves grew territorial, protective, sometimes violent, and if emotional bonds inside the pack were already fractured, the effects could become dangerous. That night, long after the mansion fell quiet, Evelyn walked slowly through the western corridors toward Lucien's study. One hand rested gently over her stomach the entire way. Nervous, hopeful, terrified. She rehearsed the words silently in her head. We're having a child. Simple, but life-changing. At least she thought it would be. Then she heard voices inside the study. Serafina. Lucien. And immediately, Evelyn stopped moving. The study doors were slightly open. Firelight flickered across the floor. Inside, Lucien stood beside the large council table while Serafina poured wine calmly into 2 silver cups. Everything about the scene looked intimate, practiced, dangerously familiar. "You need a stronger Luna," Serafina said quietly. "The council agrees." Lucien leaned heavily against the table. Exhaustion lined his face. Weeks of pressure had worn him down. The mating bond cannot simply be erased. Serafina walked closer slowly. "Then reject her." Silence followed, long enough for Evelyn's heartbeat to become unbearable. Outside the study doors, her fingers curled protectively over her stomach. Inside, Lucien lowered his head slightly, and when he finally spoke, his voice sounded tired in a way Evelyn had never heard before. "If I reject her now, the backlash could kill her." The words struck like ice through bone, not because he acknowledged the danger, because he spoke about it like discussing strategy. Consequences, politics, survival, not love, never love. Then Serafina stepped closer. Her voice softened almost tenderly. "You're too compassionate." Compassion. That word destroyed something inside Evelyn instantly. Not mate, not wife, not beloved. Compassion. As though Lucien kept her alive out of obligation. Like an injured animal too pitiful to abandon completely. Evelyn backed away from the doorway silently before either of them noticed her. And according to one servant working nearby, that was the exact moment the hallway candles extinguished again. All at once, just like before. The servant later claimed the shadows in the corridor moved strangely around Evelyn as she walked away, stretching unnaturally long behind her, following, watching. But fear kept the servant silent for years afterward. Evelyn returned alone to the eastern wing. Rain battered the mansion windows harder now. Thunder rolled across the mountains. And somewhere deep in Frostfang Forest, wolves began howling again. Not ordinary howls. These sounded layered. Too many voices blending together. The sound echoed across the territory long enough for guards stationed outside to exchange nervous looks. Even Lucien paused mid-conversation inside his study when he heard them. His wolf reacted instantly. Agitated. Protective. Searching. He frowned toward the windows, because the howls sounded close. Far too close to the estate walls. Meanwhile, inside her chambers, Evelyn stood motionless beside the fireplace. One hand pressed against her stomach. Tears slid silently down her face. But something else had changed too. The hope from earlier was gone now. Completely gone. And in its place came resolve. Low, cold, certain. The kind born only after someone realizes they are utterly alone. Then Evelyn whispered something so quietly even she barely heard it herself. "He'll never know." The fire crackled sharply the moment she said those words. And somewhere beyond the eastern windows, deep within the Black Forest, something held back. Narrator. Among all the events that unfolded before Luna Evelyn vanished, historians of the Western Territories often return to one particular night, the Black Moon Banquet, because according to surviving witnesses, that was the evening Blackthorne Pack crossed a line it could never uncross. Not through violence, not through war, but through humiliation witnessed by hundreds. And sometimes, public cruelty leaves deeper scars than bloodshed ever could. The banquet was held during the final storm week before winter fully descended across the Frostfang Mountains. An old tradition. Every major alpha from the Western Territories gathered beneath Blackthorne's roof to strengthen alliances before snow sealed the northern roads. The event symbolized unity, power, dominance. But that year, something about the estate felt wrong from the beginning. Guests noticed it immediately. The wolves guarding the gates appeared tense. Servants avoided eye contact. Several candles inside the ballroom extinguished repeatedly despite the absence of wind. One alpha later claimed his wolf refused to settle the moment he entered the mansion. Another quietly admitted he nearly left before the celebration even began. When questioned years later about why, he gave only one answer. The territory felt awake. By nightfall, the grand ballroom glowed beneath gold chandeliers and moonstone lanterns hanging from the ceiling arches. Music echoed across polished marble floors. Nobles danced. Council elders drank heavily beside roaring fireplaces. And everywhere, wolves whispered. Not about politics, not about war, about Evelyn. Because rumors spread quickly inside powerful packs. Especially rumors involving weakness. She's losing him. Serafina already behaves like the Luna. I heard Lucien barely enters Evelyn's chambers anymore. She won't survive a rejection. Every whisper cut deeper than the last. And through it all, Evelyn remained alone near the eastern pillars of the ballroom, wearing silver-blue silk chosen specifically because Lucien once told her it reminded him of moonlight. A memory she regretted holding on to now. Witnesses later described Evelyn as strangely calm that night. Calm. No tears. No visible anger. Just exhaustion hidden beneath elegance. And according to several servants, she kept touching her stomach unconsciously throughout the evening. Protective. Instinctive. As though shielding something no one else could see. Meanwhile, outside the mansion walls, the storm worsened. Thunder rolled continuously across the mountains. And deep within Frostfang Forest, the wolves had started howling long before midnight. Not ordinary territory calls. These came in waves. Layered. Mournful. Almost ceremonial. Older wolves recognized the sound immediately. But none dared explain its meaning aloud. Then the ballroom doors opened. And everything changed. Lucien entered beside Serafina. Not Evelyn. Gasps spread instantly through the crowd. Because Serafina was wearing silver. Not gray. Not white. Silver. The color reserved exclusively for the ruling Luna of Blackthorne Pack. For several seconds, the ballroom fell unnaturally quiet. Even the musicians faltered. Lucien noticed immediately. So did Evelyn. Across the room their eyes met. And witnesses later swore something unreadable passed across the Alpha's face in that moment. Not pride. Not satisfaction. Guilt. Sharp and immediate. As though even he understood the damage already done. But before Lucien could react, Serafina slipped her arm through his. Possessive. Elegant. Claiming space that did not belong to her. And Lucien allowed it. That single decision would haunt him for years afterward. Because from that moment on, the pack no longer viewed Evelyn as their Luna. And wolves are dangerous once they smell someone losing status. The humiliation escalated slowly, cruelly, like water rising around someone too exhausted to fight back. Servants approached Serafina first for greetings instead of Evelyn. Council elders bowed lower toward the northern heiress than toward the bonded Luna. Even younger wolves began watching Evelyn openly now, waiting, studying her reaction like predators circling weakened prey. Yet Evelyn endured it silently. That silence disturbed several witnesses later, because she did not look angry. She looked resigned. And resignation frightens people more than rage. Hours passed. Wine flowed endlessly. Music drowned beneath thunder. Then came the conversation that many believed finally broke her. Evelyn had stepped briefly into the western corridor seeking air away from the ballroom when she overheard a group of noble she-wolves speaking nearby. She's too fragile. No wonder Lucien prefers Serafina. I heard the mating bond weakened months ago. Another voice laughed quietly. They say the Alpha avoids touching her completely. Laughter followed. Cruel. Intimate. And just as Evelyn lowered her head and tried to walk away, another sound reached her from inside the ballroom. Lucien laughing. Not mocking her directly. Not even aware she could hear him. But that almost made it worse. Because while she stood alone trying not to fall apart, he sounded happy, comfortable, free of her pain. Years later, one servant who witnessed Evelyn in that hallway described the moment carefully. She looked like someone realizing they had already disappeared. What happened next remains one of the most debated details in Blackthorne history. because multiple witnesses reported unusual events occurring simultaneously throughout the estate shortly after Lucien's laughter echoed across the ballroom. The chandeliers flickered violently. Several wolves became restless without explanation. One child began crying uncontrollably, insisting someone was standing outside the windows. And the patrol guards stationed near the eastern forest swore they saw movement between the trees. Tall figures, watching the mansion, then vanishing whenever approached. At first, the elders dismissed these reports as storm anxiety, until the dogs in the lower kennels began howling. Every single one of them. The exact same time. Midnight arrived shortly afterward. And without speaking to anyone, Evelyn quietly left the banquet. No dramatic confrontation. No tears. No scene. She simply disappeared from the ballroom while hundreds celebrated around her. But one person noticed. Lucien. Though he continued speaking with neighboring alphas, his eyes tracked her instinctively as she crossed the marble staircase alone. Then she vanished into the eastern wing shadows. And something inside him tightened painfully. The mating bond again. Pulling. Warning. Demanding. Go after her. Yet Lucien remained where he was. Perhaps out of pride. Perhaps confusion. Perhaps fear of what she might say if he followed. That hesitation would become the greatest mistake of his life. Rain hammered against the eastern tower windows as Evelyn entered her chambers. The silence there felt suffocating after the noise downstairs. Slowly, she locked the doors, then crossed toward the bed. Kneeling carefully, she reached beneath the wooden frame and pulled open a hidden drawer. Inside sat everything she had spent weeks secretly preparing. Stolen money, travel papers, warm clothing, medicinal herbs, and folded carefully beneath them all, a single ultrasound sketch from the healer. Evelyn picked it up with trembling fingers. For a long time, she stared silently at the tiny shape drawn across the page. The only person who truly belonged to her now. The only soul she trusted herself to protect. Tears slid down her face quietly. Then she whispered the words that would later be repeated across every territory in the north. I'll protect you, even if I have to disappear. At that exact moment, the storm outside intensified violently. Thunder shook the tower walls hard enough to rattle the windows. And somewhere far below the mansion, wolves began howling again. Closer this time. Much closer. Then came the sound. A slow creak behind her. The bedroom door opening. Evelyn froze instantly. Rain scent entered the room first. And him. Lucien stood motionless near the doorway, water dripping from his dark coat onto the stone floor. His glowing eyes locked immediately onto the packed travel bag near the bed. Silence swallowed the room whole. No music. No thunder. Only breathing. Heavy, uneven breathing. And for the first time that night, Lucien looked afraid. Not angry. Afraid. Because his wolf finally understood something his mind had refused to accept all evening. Evelyn was preparing to leave him. Then the alpha spoke. Low. Controlled. Dangerously soft. Where are you going? Narrator. Evelyn did not answer immediately. Not because she didn't hear him, but because the room itself seemed to stop responding to sound. The rain outside the windows slowed in her perception. The flickering firelight became distant. Even Lucien's presence, so overwhelming just moments ago, felt suddenly suspended, as though the world was holding its breath alongside her. Her fingers tightened instinctively over her stomach. Protective. Instinctual. A movement that gave him all the confirmation he needed before she even spoke. Lucien stepped forward again. This time slower. Careful. Like approaching something fragile enough to disappear if touched too harshly. You're pregnant, he repeated, voice lower now. Not a question anymore. A realization. Evelyn's throat tightened. She looked away. That single motion said more than any confession could. Silence followed. Heavy. Unbroken. Inside Lucien's chest, something shifted violently. Witnesses to alpha bond reactions would later describe it as internal collapse. Not physical pain, but something far more destabilizing. Because alpha wolves do not process betrayal the same way others do. They process disruption, loss of control, irreversible change. And nothing destabilizes an alpha more than realizing something vital has existed under their protection, without their knowledge. Lucien released her wrist slowly, as if touching her suddenly felt dangerous. His gaze dropped briefly to her stomach again, then returned to her face, searching, measuring, processing every moment he had ignored, every silence he had chosen, every time she stood alone while he turned away. "You were going to leave," he said quietly. Evelyn's voice trembled. "I had no reason to stay." That sentence hit harder than anything else in the room. Because it was not spoken in anger. It was spoken as fact. Lucien stepped back slightly, as though distance might stabilize what was collapsing inside him. "You should have told me." Evelyn laughed once. Short, broken, almost disbelieving. "And what would you have done?" The question lingered. Too long. Too real. Lucien did not answer immediately. And that hesitation was everything. Outside the room, the estate began reacting again. Unexplained. Subtle. First came the flickering hallway lights. Then the sudden silence of the wind outside the tower. Then the wolves. Always the wolves. Howling again. But this time, closer than before. Not from the forest. From within Blackthorne territory itself. Inside the chamber, Evelyn stepped away from Lucien slowly, creating space. Not because she feared him physically, but because proximity made thinking impossible. "I heard everything," she said quietly. Lucien's jaw tightened. "What you said to Serafina." A flicker crossed his face. Recognition. Regret. Something unstable and unspoken. Evelyn continued. "You didn't even deny it properly." Lucien exhaled sharply. That conversation was taken out of context. Evelyn's eyes lifted slowly. "And when I fell silent at the banquet, was that also context?" The question landed heavily. Lucien didn't respond. Not because he didn't have an answer, but because any answer he gave now would feel insufficient. Evelyn walked toward the bed again, her movements slower now, more deliberate. Lucien watched her carefully, like someone trying to anticipate a shift in a battlefield he no longer controlled. "You're carrying an heir," he said again, still trying to anchor reality. Evelyn nodded slightly. "Yes." That single word changed the room again. Lucien's breath tightened. "You were going to leave with my child." "I was going to protect them," she corrected softly. That correction unsettled him more than anger ever could. Because she was not asking permission. She was stating priority. Lucien stepped closer again. This time his voice dropped. Not alpha command. Something quieter. More human. "You think I would have let you go?" Evelyn finally looked at him fully. And what he saw there made him still. Because her eyes were not pleading anymore. They were decided. "I don't know what you would have done," she said. And that is the problem." Silence spread through the room again. Thicker now. Almost physical. Lucien's wolf was restless inside him. Reacting violently to the distance between them. To the child. To the emotional fracture that had already formed long before this moment. He spoke again. "You're not leaving." Evelyn blinked slowly. "That's not your decision." The statement landed like a challenge. Not spoken loudly, but undeniably final. Then something changed. Not in Lucien. Not in Evelyn. But in the bond itself. Every mate bond carries fluctuations under emotional strain. But what witnesses later recorded from similar alpha-level bonds described something unusual occurring at that exact moment. Almost like the bond itself reacted to the unborn heir. Lucien froze instantly. So did Evelyn. Both of them felt it. Second heartbeat. Not hers. Not his. Something between them. Something already aware. Lucien's voice dropped. The child is responding. Evelyn's hand instinctively pressed tighter against her stomach. Fear flickered in her eyes for the first time that night. I don't understand what you mean. Lucien did not move. 'Cause he understood too well. Alpha heirs do not only inherit strength, they inherit imprint sensitivity. And in rare cases, bond resonance begins before birth. Meaning emotions around the mother can directly influence the unborn wolf. Lucien's expression darkened slightly. Not with anger, but realization. If you leave now, he said slowly, the stress on the bond could harm them. Evelyn stiffened. Don't use my child as control. The accusation hit him hard. And for a brief moment, he looked like he might deny it. But he didn't. Because the truth was already visible between them. He was afraid. Not of her leaving, but of what leaving might cost. Outside the tower, a distant crash echoed through the estate, followed by shouting, then movement, guards reacting. Something had crossed the outer perimeter. Something was inside Blackthorne territory now. But neither Evelyn nor Lucien moved toward the sound. Because inside the room, something far more unstable was unfolding. Lucien lowered his voice. I never meant for it to become like this. Evelyn's eyes sharpened slightly. You didn't mean it, she repeated. But you allowed it. Silence. No defense came after that. Because there was none strong enough. Evelyn reached for the travel bag again. Lucien stepped forward immediately. Don't. That single word carried authority. Instinct. Fear. But Evelyn stopped anyway. Slowly. Not because she obeyed. But because something outside the window shifted again. A shadow passed across the glass. Too large for a normal wolf. Too silent for wind. Both of them noticed it. The same time. Lucien turned slightly toward the window. Then back to her. Stay here, he said quietly. Evelyn stared at him. Or what? Question hung there. Unanswered. 'Cause for the first time, Lucien Blackthorne did not have control over the outcome. Not of her. Not of the bond. And not of whatever had just entered his territory. Narrator. And according to recovered records from Blackthorne patrol logs, that was the exact moment every tracking signal across the eastern forest went dark simultaneously. No warnings. No alarms. Just silence. As though something had stepped into the territory and turned the entire system off by simply existing. And inside the tower, Lucien finally realized something far more dangerous than Evelyn leaving him. Something else had already begun moving toward them. And it was not part of any pack. Narrator. The moment Seraphina stepped into the doorway, everything inside the tower shifted. Not gradually. Not subtly. Instantly. As though the very structure of the night had been rearranged around her arrival. Her dress was torn. Blood stained the fabric across her shoulder and ribs. Her breathing was uneven, carefully performed, controlled enough to appear injured, yet precise enough to remain composed. And her eyes never left Evelyn. Not once. Lucien turned sharply toward the guard. What happened? The guard hesitated. An ambush outside the northern ridge. The delegation was attacked during passage. We found Seraphina wounded near the tree line. Seraphina stepped forward slowly, every movement deliberate. Then she spoke, her voice fragile, but calculated. She poisoned me. Silence. Not confusion. Not disbelief. Silence that immediately rearranged loyalty inside the room. Because in pack politics, accusation is never neutral. It is a weapon. And Seraphina had just aimed it directly at Evelyn. Evelyn's breath caught. I didn't. Seraphina raised a trembling hand, cutting her off. She was the only one with access to the council provisions before we left. A murmur spread instantly through the guards. The word access carried weight. It implied opportunity, intent, planning. Lucien's gaze snapped toward Evelyn. Dark. Searching. Evelyn stepped back instinctively. No. I never even left the tower. But Serafina shook her head slowly, almost mournfully. That's what makes it worse. You don't have to physically be present to destroy someone. The room tightened again. The accusation was not loud. It didn't need to be. It was structured carefully enough to seed doubt without proof. And doubt in alpha territory is enough to start wars. Lucien moved slightly between them. Not fully defending. Not condemning. Suspended. Caught between instinct and politics. Evelyn noticed immediately. And something inside her cracked again. You believe her, she whispered. Lucien's jaw tightened. I don't know what to believe. That answer was worse than accusation. Because uncertainty in an alpha is never just emotional. It becomes operational. Decisions, orders, consequences. Thunder rolled violently overhead. The windows of the tower vibrated faintly. Somewhere far below. Footsteps rushed through corridors. More guards arriving. More witnesses gathering. The estate reacting like a body-sensing infection. Serafina swayed slightly, leaning into Lucien's line of sight. Her voice softened again. I was protecting your delegation route. She's been unstable for weeks. You've seen it yourself. Evelyn's eyes widened. Unstable. Serafina nodded. Emotional. Isolated. And now, desperate enough to run. Evelyn let out a short, broken laugh. You think I would poison someone just to leave? Serafina's expression didn't change. That depends on how badly you want freedom. Calculated pause. Then the final push. Or how much you hate being here. Silence swallowed the room again. And this time, Lucien looked down. Not at Serafina. Not at the guard. At Evelyn. That single movement changed everything. Because it meant the accusation had entered consideration. Not acceptance. But evaluation. And Evelyn felt it immediately. The shift. The fracture. The moment she stopped being mate and started becoming suspect. Evelyn's voice shook. I carried your bond for years without asking for anything. Lucien didn't respond. You ignored me. Still silence. I endured your silence. His hand tightened slightly. I watched you laugh with her while I stood alone. Then softer. And now you believe I would poison her. Lucien finally spoke. I didn't say I believe it. But that was not reassurance. It was delay. Outside the tower, something moved again in the forest line. Guards stationed along the outer wall shouted briefly. Then stopped. Abruptly. As though their voices had been cut mid-sound. Within seconds, the eastern perimeter went silent. No footsteps. No communication. No shifting patrol signals. Just emptiness. Inside the chamber, Serafina suddenly collapsed again. More dramatically this time. Lucien caught her instinctively. Her hand gripped his sleeve. Weak. Fragile. Controlled. They tried to kill me, she whispered. Perfect timing. Perfect angle. And then, her gaze flicked briefly toward Evelyn. Not accusation anymore. Confirmation. Evelyn saw it. And understood immediately. This was not survival. It was positioning. A replacement war disguised as an attack. And she was already the designated enemy. Lucien lowered Serafina carefully onto a chair. Then stood again. Slowly. Turning back toward Evelyn. His expression had changed. Not fully hardened. Not fully softened. But divided. A leader forced to choose without certainty. Until this is investigated, he said carefully, you will remain under observation. Evelyn stared at him. The words did not land immediately. Because her mind had already gone somewhere else. Observation. Not protection. Not trust. Observation. Contained suspect. She whispered. So that's it. Lucien stepped forward slightly. This is temporary. But Evelyn shook her head. No. Her voice sharpened now. This is what you wanted. Lucien froze. Evelyn's eyes glistened. You never had to reject me. You just needed someone else to do it for you. The room went still again. Even Serafina stopped breathing for a moment. Because the accusation had turned inward. Not at Serafina. At Lucien. Lucien's voice dropped. That's not true. But it sounded weaker than before. Evelyn stepped back toward the travel bag again. Low. Deliberate. Protective. I won't stay here while you decide whether I'm guilty. Lucien moved forward instantly. Evelyn. But she raised a hand. Stopping him. Not with force. With finality. And then it happened. Another pulse. Not emotional. Not political. Something deeper. The bond reacted violently again. But this time, it was different. Sharper. More urgent. Evelyn gasped slightly, one hand going to her stomach. Lucien felt it too. His eyes widened. Because the unborn heir responded again. Strongly. Almost alarmed. The room went silent. Even Serafina noticed the shift. Lucien's attention snapped downward instantly. The child. Evelyn stepped back instinctively. Don't use them. But Lucien shook his head slightly. No, something's wrong. That line changed everything again. Because now it wasn't about accusation. It was about instinct. Outside the tower, a distant howl rose. But this one was different from before. Not layered. Not mournful. Focused. Directional. As though something had found what it was looking for. And was closing in. Narrator. According to recovered Blackthorne security logs, every external ward along the eastern forest boundary deactivated at the exact same second following that howl. No breach recorded. No force detected. Just silence across every magical barrier. As if something had simply walked through protections that had stood for generations. Without resistance. And inside the tower, Lucien Blackthorne realized the truth forming beneath everything else. Whatever was approaching the estate was not reacting to Serafina's injury, not to Evelyn's presence, but to the unborn alpha heir. And for the first time that night, the real threat was no longer inside the room. Narrator. The accusation did not remain contained within the tower for long. Within minutes, it spread through Blackthorne estate like wildfire through dry bone. Guards moved first, then servants, then council representatives, and finally, the pack itself, not as individuals, but as a single shifting judgment. Because in werewolf society, truth is rarely what decides guilt. Perception does. And perception had already chosen a target. Evelyn was escorted from the chamber without resistance, not because she accepted it, but because resistance would only deepen the accusation. Her wrists were not bound. They didn't need to be. 3 armed guards flanked her on each side as she walked through the corridor. Every step echoed against stone walls that suddenly felt unfamiliar, like she had never truly belonged inside them at all. Whispers followed instantly. She did it. I always knew she was unstable. Lucien should have rejected her earlier. Each voice added weight. Each sentence stripped something invisible from her. Until all that remained was silence inside her own mind. Serafina's performance continued flawlessly. By the time they reached the lower hall, she had already regained enough composure to appear fragile but authoritative. She leaned into Lucien's side as though weakened by poison still circulating in her system. Her voice trembled just enough to convince the audience. I trusted her. Then softer. And she repaid me with death. The hall reacted instantly. Anger. Shifting loyalty. Because wolves respond not to evidence, but emotion. And Serafina knew exactly how to shape it. Lucien stood at the center of the hall, motionless. The alpha aura around him fluctuated violently. Not outward aggression. Internal conflict. Because nothing about the situation aligned cleanly. Poison vial. Timing. The framing. And yet, the pack was already moving toward judgment. Elders stepped forward first. This is a direct violation of council law. She attempted to eliminate a sanctioned delegation. The punishment is clear. Evelyn stood at the edge of the chamber as they spoke, listening, not reacting, because at a certain point, shock stops being emotional and becomes observational. Then came the moment that fractured everything further. One of the guards returned with the evidence. Small vial, dark residue inside. He placed it on the council table. Immediately several elders leaned in. One nodded sharply. Poison used in northern assassinations. Another added. Identical to restricted compounds stored in eastern wing supply rooms. Evelyn's breath caught slightly. Someone had prepared this carefully. Too carefully. Not a mistake. Not a coincidence. Structure. Plan. Evelyn turned toward Lucien slowly. Her voice was quieter now. Stripped of everything except truth. Tell them you know I didn't do this. Lucien didn't answer immediately. That pause stretched. And stretched again. Inside him. Something was breaking apart. Because alpha instinct was screaming. Protect. Defend. Reject falsehood. But leadership instinct was louder. Stability. Council unity. A control. And standing between them. Was her. Lucien finally spoke. It's complicated. The words landed heavier than silence. Evelyn blinked once. Slowly. Almost as though trying to confirm she had heard correctly. Then she repeated it softly. Complicated. A bitter breath escaped her lips. Everything with me is always complicated to you. Lucien's jaw tightened. But he didn't correct her. Because he couldn't. Then the second collapse happened. Serafina suddenly staggered backward. Perfect timing. Too precise to ignore. The baby, she whispered. The entire hall froze again. Confusion rippled instantly through the pack. Pregnancy changes everything in wolf politics, especially when it involves alpha heirs. Lucien turned sharply toward her. What baby? Serafina looked up at him with trembling eyes. I didn't want to tell you this way. Then the words fell. I'm carrying your child. Silence detonated across the hall. Not emotional silence. Structural silence. Like the entire political foundation of the pack had just cracked in real time. Evelyn felt it immediately. A shift. Not in the room. Inside Lucien. His expression changed. Shock first. Then disbelief. Then something far more dangerous. Horror. 'Cause suddenly, everything was no longer simple betrayal or accusation. It was inheritance. Future lineage. Power succession. Two possible heirs. Two competing truths. And a fractured mate bond already on the edge of collapse. Evelyn took one step back. Then another. Not from fear. From clarity. Because she finally understood something she had refused to accept before. She was no longer part of a triangle. She was a variable. A complication to be resolved. Lucien's wolf roared inside him. Violent now. Unstable. Protect her. Protect both. Protect everything. But politics tightened around him like iron restraints. The council stepped forward again. Alpha Lucien, immediate containment is required. She is unstable. She threatens both heirs. Decision must be made now. Lucien closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them again, something had changed. Not fully cold. Not fully distant. But controlled. Too controlled. Until the investigation is complete. His voice echoed through the hall. Evelyn will remain confined. The words dropped like execution. Not metaphorically. Practically. Because in Blackthorne law, confinement during council investigation meant removal from influence. From protection. From authority. From future decisions. Evelyn didn't speak at first. She simply stared at him. Searching for something that wasn't there anymore. Then quietly, she nodded. Not acceptance. Recognition. You chose her. Lucien stepped forward instantly. No. But she was already turning away. Walking. Not running. Not pleading. Just leaving. And that difference mattered more than anything else that night. because it meant she was done expecting rescue. Narrator. Witnesses later described the moment Evelyn exited the council hall as unnatural, not because of emotion, but because of absence. One elder claimed the temperature dropped as she passed. Another said the candles along the corridor flickered out one by one behind her steps. And several guards reported hearing something unusual as she left. Not words, not sound, but a pressure in the air. Like something had been sealed shut inside her. Lucien remained still as she disappeared from view. But inside him, the bond reacted violently. Not pain this time. Immediate. Irreversible. For the first time in his life, Lucien Blackthorne felt fear that had nothing to do with enemies, and everything to do with consequence, because something deep in his instincts whispered a truth he could no longer ignore. If Evelyn left the estate in this state, she would not return as the same woman who entered it. And neither would whatever was growing inside her. Not anymore. Narrator. The official record states that Luna Evelyn was placed under protective confinement in the eastern tower of Blackthorne Estate at approximately 42:17 hours. But what happened after that point has been described in fragmented accounts, contradictory witness reports, and emotional testimony that even decades later remains difficult to verify. Because in the final hours before dawn, something irreversible occurred inside the estate. Something that changed Lucien Blackthorne forever. The East Tower was not a prison by design. It was originally built as a sanctuary. A place for injured Lunas during wartime. Thick stone walls, high windows, a single balcony overlooking the Frostfang forest. But on that night, it became something else entirely. Isolation. Complete. Intentional. And Evelyn remained inside it alone. Rain struck the glass in violent waves. The wind outside screamed against the structure as though trying to force its way in. Inside the chamber, Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, unmoving. Her hands rested over her stomach with a gentleness that contrasted everything happening outside her body. Her breathing was uneven, not chaotic, controlled, as if she was holding herself together purely for the life growing inside her. Then she whispered softly into the silence. "I'm sorry." No one answered. Only thunder. Down below. The Blackthorne estate continued as if nothing had changed. Guards rotated patrols. Council members debated outcomes. Serafina remained under observation in the medical wing, carefully guarded and strategically positioned. And Lucien stood alone in his study, motionless, staring at the moonstone mating ring resting in his palm, the symbol of their bond, now cold, unresponsive. He turned it slowly between his fingers, and for the first time since the ceremony, he questioned everything, not decisions, not politics, but himself. Inside him, the bond reacted again, violent, dark, unstable, a pulse that forced him to grip the desk for support. His wolf paced aggressively beneath his skin. Not angry. Not confused. Panic. Go to her. Lucien's breathing tightened. Something was wrong. Not emotionally. Structurally. As though the bond itself was being stretched beyond safe limits. He stepped forward instantly. Then stopped. Because from the corridor outside, he heard footsteps. Rapid. Urgent. Guards. The door burst open. Alpha! Lucien turned sharply. What? The guard hesitated. She's still in confinement, but... A second guard interrupted. Her scent is weakening across the tower perimeter. Silence hit the room instantly. That was not normal. Not even for suppression wards. Lucien's expression changed. Open the tower. By the time he reached the eastern wing, the atmosphere had already shifted. The hallway felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Even the torches flickered irregularly along the walls. One by one. Dimming. Falling. As though something was moving through them. Lucien reached the tower doors. Open it. The guards obeyed immediately. The doors creaked open. And the moment Lucien stepped inside, he froze. The room was empty. Not disturbed. Not damaged. The bed untouched. The chains unused. The candles still burning. But Evelyn was gone. Lucien moved forward slowly. His eyes scanned everything. Searching. Calculating. Refusing to accept what instinct already knew. No, he whispered. Then louder. Evelyn. No answer. Only wind. He turned sharply toward the balcony. And that was when he saw it. The curtains were moving violently. Not from rain. From open air. The balcony doors were wide open. Lucien stepped outside instantly. The storm hit him immediately. Rain soaked his coat within seconds. Wind tore through the tower edge. And beyond it, the Frostfang forest stretched endlessly into darkness. Alive. Waiting. Then he felt it. A bond. Violent now. Breaking. Distance collapsing into panic. Pain surged through him so sharply he staggered. Evelyn! He turned back into the room, searching again. And that was when he saw it. On the floor near the bed. A small silver bracelet. Familiar. His gift. The one he had placed on her wrist during the mating ceremony. Lucien dropped to his knees instantly, hands shaking. Because beneath the bracelet was something else. A folded piece of paper. Stained. Darkened. Blood. He opened it. And read. You laughed while I broke. Now live with the silence you created. Silence followed. Not the absence of sound. The absence of reality. Lucien's breath shattered. His grip tightened around the note until it crumpled violently in his hand. For the first time in recorded Blackthorne history, the Alpha's wolf fully broke through suppression. A howl erupted from him. Uncontrolled. Crushing. It echoed across the tower walls and out into the storm. Down below, every wolf in the estate froze simultaneously. 'Cause they felt it. Not anger. Not command. Absolute loss. Lucien stood slowly. Rain dripping from his face. Eyes glowing gold. Searching the forest line desperately. But there was nothing. No scent trail. No movement. No return signal from the bond. Only fading presence. Slipping further away with every second. Narrator. Official records state that every tracking ward along the eastern forest boundary failed at precisely 49:58 hours. Not damaged. Not breached. Simply inactive. As though the forest itself had chosen to stop acknowledging anything leaving the estate. And witnesses reported the final confirmed sighting of Luna Evelyn Blackthorne was not on the ground, but on the balcony edge, standing still, looking back once, before disappearing into the Frostfang forest beneath the storm. Lucien's voice broke into the wind. Evelyn! But there was no answer. Only rain. Only darkness. Only silence where her presence used to be. And for the first time since becoming Alpha, Lucien Blackthorne understood something he had never been forced to face before. Power meant nothing. When the one person your soul was tied to had already decided you no longer deserved to follow them into the night. Lucien stepped toward her slowly, pain breaking through his voice. Please come home. Evelyn stared at him in silence. Then one of the twin boys suddenly shifted partially into wolf form. The entire council gasped. Impossible. Children that young should never possess alpha blood strong enough to shift. But Evelyn wasn't shocked. She already knew. Because her sons carried something far more dangerous than alpha blood. They carried the bloodline of the ancient wolf king. And somewhere deep in the frozen north, someone had finally discovered the heirs were alive. The hunt had begun. Fade to black.